The morning sunlight slipped through the tall glass windows of the Anderson mansion, touching every corner of the house that sparkled with wealth and elegance. Expensive paintings covered the walls, and chandeliers hung from the ceiling like jewels. Isabella Anderson, the millionaire's wife, walked slowly down the long hallway with a cup of coffee in her hand. Everything looked perfect, just like her life, or so it seemed. But deep down, Isabella knew something wasn't right. For months now, every maid she hired had left suddenly, without warning, without explanation. The first one, Clara, had left after only 3 weeks. The second lasted 2 months. Then came Mary, who ran out of the mansion in tears one night and never came back. The last one didn't even wait to collect her pay. At first, Isabella had brushed it off. Maybe they found better jobs, she told her husband, Daniel, one evening over dinner. But Daniel wasn't convinced. 5 maids in less than a year. He said, shaking his head. Something isn't normal. Still, Isabella tried to stay calm. She had grown up believing that money could fix anything, that if she paid well, treated people kindly, and kept things perfect, nothing could go wrong. But now, even the people she hired didn't want to stay. One morning, Isabella was in the kitchen talking to her new maid Anna, a quiet woman in her 30s who had joined only a week ago. "Is everything all right here?" Isabella asked gently. Anna hesitated. "Yes, ma'am," she said softly, avoiding eye contact. But her hands trembled slightly as she washed the dishes. "You sure?" Isabella pressed, sensing fear in her tone. Anna nodded quickly, forcing a smile. "Everything is fine." But Isabella wasn't convinced. She noticed that Anna avoided one particular hallway, the one that led to the old nursery room upstairs. Every time she went near it, her face turned pale. That night, Isabella couldn't sleep. She lay awake beside her husband, staring at the ceiling. Daniel had fallen asleep long ago, his soft breathing filling the room. But Isabella's mind kept spinning. Why were all her maids afraid of that part of the house? At around midnight, she got up and decided to walk around. The mansion was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock. As she passed the nursery hallway, a sudden chill ran down her spine. The air there always felt colder, heavier. She glanced at the door of the old nursery. It was slightly open. Isabella froze. She was sure she had locked it months ago. Slowly, she walked toward it and pushed it open. The room inside was dark and dusty, untouched for years. Faded wallpaper peeled off the walls, and an old rocking chair sat near the window, still and quiet. On the shelf, tiny toys and baby books were covered in cobwebs. Isabella felt her chest tighten. Memories she had buried long ago began to surface. Memories of laughter, lullabies, and a small crib that once stood in the middle of this room. She quickly stepped back and closed the door, her heart pounding. She didn't want to think about it. Not tonight. The next morning, Anna was gone. She didn't leave a note, didn't say goodbye. Her apron was folded neatly on the counter, and her keys were left beside it. Isabella sighed as she looked at them. Another maid, gone without a word. That evening, Isabella called her husband. Daniel Anna left too. He sounded frustrated. Again? Did she say why? No, Isabella said, rubbing her forehead. She just left. Maybe you should talk to them before they go next time, Daniel suggested. Find out the real reason. But Isabella didn't get that chance. Every maid she hired after that stayed only a few days. One of them, a young girl named Rosa, was so scared she refused to stay the night. Please, ma'am, she said, her eyes wide with fear. Something is wrong in this house. What do you mean? Isabella asked, startled. I can't explain, Rosa whispered. But I hear things. I feel like someone's watching me when I walk through the halls, especially near that room upstairs. Isabella's skin went cold. The nursery? Rosa nodded quickly. Yes. I can't stay here. I'm sorry. And before Isabella could stop her, the girl ran out of the house, crying. For the rest of the night, Isabella sat alone in the living room, her mind racing. She didn't believe in ghosts or curses, but something about the way Rosa had spoken sent shivers down her spine. Could it really be that something strange was happening? Daniel returned home late that night. When she told him what happened, he sighed. Maybe it's just superstition, he said. You know how people talk? Maybe, Isabella replied softly, but her voice lacked conviction. Over the next few days, the mansion felt heavier than ever. The sound of the wind outside began to feel like whispers. Sometimes, Isabella thought she heard faint footsteps when she was alone. Other times, she would catch a glimpse of something in the corner of her eye, a shadow that disappeared when she turned. She told herself she was imagining it. But one evening, while sitting in her room, she heard something that made her blood run cold. A soft, distant cry. Coming from the direction of the old nursery, her hands began to shake. She walked toward the door, each step slower than the last. The crying grew clearer, the sound of a child, faint and sorrowful. But when she opened the nursery door, there was nothing there. Only silence. Isabella stood frozen in the doorway, her heart thudding in her chest. Something was happening in her home, and she had no idea what it was. But one thing she knew for sure, it wasn't her imagination. That night, for the first time, she whispered to herself, I'm going to find out the truth. Little did she know. What she was about to discover would change everything she believed about her house, her past, and even herself. The next morning. Isabella woke up with one thought repeating in her mind: she had to know the truth. No more guessing, no more waiting for answers from people who refused to talk. Whatever was happening inside her mansion, she would find out herself. She called her husband, Daniel, who was away on a business trip. Daniel, she said, trying to sound calm, I think I'm going to install cameras in the house, just for safety. There was a pause on the other end. Cameras. Do you really think that's necessary? He asked. Yes, she replied firmly. Something's not right here. The maids aren't just quitting, they're terrified. I need to see what's scaring them. Daniel hesitated, then sighed. All right. If it makes you feel better, do it. Just ... Be careful. Later that day, a technician came and set up small, discreet cameras in different parts of the house, one in the kitchen, one in the main hallway, one near the staircase, and another near the nursery door. Isabella didn't tell the new maid, Lila, about them. She wanted natural behavior, no acting. For the first 2 days, everything seemed normal. Isabella went about her usual routine: morning coffee, gardening, calls with Daniel, and evening walks around the house. Lila worked quietly, always polite, never complaining. Still, Isabella noticed small things that made her uneasy. Lila avoided turning her back to the nursery hallway. Sometimes she would pause suddenly, as if she heard something that Isabella couldn't. One evening, Isabella saw her cleaning near the stairs, and the moment a faint creak echoed from above, Lila froze. Her face turned pale. Lila, Isabella asked. Are you all right? Lila forced a smile and nodded. Yes, ma'am. Just tired. But that night, Isabella couldn't sleep again. She got up, turned on her laptop, and opened the live camera feed. Everything looked still. The kitchen lights were off, the hallway was empty, and the house looked peaceful. At around 1:30 a.m., something caught her eye. On the hallway camera, she noticed the nursery door slowly moving, not opening wide, just swaying slightly back and forth, as if someone had nudged it. Her breath caught. She stared at the screen, frozen. Then she saw a faint shadow near the door, small and low to the ground. It moved slowly, almost gliding. Isabella's hands began to shake. "What is that?" she whispered to herself. She switched to another camera angle. The shadow was gone. But a few seconds later, on the staircase feed, the same movement appeared again. Soft, light steps like those of a child. Her pulse quickened. The sound of her own heartbeat filled her ears. The next morning, she said nothing to Lila, but she decided to watch the full recording from the night before. She fast-forwarded through hours of nothing until just past midnight. The footage showed Lila walking down the hallway, holding a tray. She stopped suddenly, looking toward the nursery. Her body stiffened. The tray slipped from her hands and crashed to the floor. The sound was sharp, echoing through the empty mansion. Lila's lips moved. She was whispering something, trembling. Then she turned and ran. Isabella pressed pause, her eyes wide. What did she see? She whispered. That evening, when Lila returned from the market, Isabella gently asked, "Lila, what happened last night?" Lila looked startled. "What do you mean, ma'am?" "I saw you drop the tray. You looked scared." "What did you see?" Lila's eyes filled with tears. "Please, ma'am, don't ask me that." "Tell me," Isabella said softly. "I won't be angry." Lila's voice trembled. "I don't know how to explain it. I saw a little girl standing by the nursery door. She was wearing a white dress. She was looking at me, but she wasn't really there. I could see through her." Isabella's body went cold. For a long moment, she couldn't breathe. A child. A little girl. "Maybe it was a reflection," she said quickly. "You were tired?" "No, ma'am," Lila interrupted, shaking her head. She spoke. She said, "Don't let her forget me." That night, Isabella sat in front of the screen again, replaying the video over and over. She increased the brightness, zoomed in, adjusted the contrast until suddenly, she saw it too. A small figure near the nursery door, pale, still, unmistakably. Shaped like a little girl. Her heart raced as her eyes filled with tears. She whispered one name, a name she hadn't said aloud in years. Emily. Her daughter. The baby she had lost when she was only 2 years old. 4 years. Isabella had locked that pain away, convincing herself that moving on meant forgetting. She had shut the nursery, packed away the toys, and refused to speak about it again. But now, staring at the faint image on the screen, her chest ached with grief and guilt. She spent the rest of the night sitting in front of the monitor, tears streaming down her face. Around 3 a.m., she heard it again through the camera's microphone this time. A faint sob, soft, sad, like a child crying for her mother. "Emily," Isabella whispered through trembling lips. Even though she knew there would be no answer. The next morning, she opened the nursery door for the first time in years. Dust covered everything, but nothing had changed. The rocking chair was still in its place. On the small shelf by the window, she saw a box faded and worn. Inside were tiny baby clothes, a stuffed bear, and an old photograph, a picture of her holding baby Emily, smiling, full of life. Isabella sank to her knees, clutching the photo to her chest, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm sorry," she whispered over and over. "I didn't forget you. I just couldn't face it." For the first time in years. She let herself cry, not as a wife, not as a millionaire, but as a mother who had finally faced her truth. Outside the window, the morning light filled the room again, soft and gentle. And for a moment, it felt as though the house itself sighed in relief, as if the sadness it carried had finally begun to lift. Asterisk. 4 days after discovering the camera footage, Isabella couldn't focus on anything else. The image of that small, faint figure near the nursery door haunted her every waking moment. She had tried to convince herself it was just her imagination, or maybe a trick of the light, but deep down, she knew better. Something inside her had been unlocked, a pain she had buried years ago. Now demanding to be felt, she stopped the cameras. She stopped calling the technician to check the system. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't interested in technology or perfection. All she wanted was to understand. One evening, she sat in the nursery again, the one she had closed after losing little Emily. The air inside felt heavy, but strangely calm, like the room had been waiting for her to return. Dust floated in the sunlight, glimmering like tiny ghosts of memories. She touched the rocking chair, and it creaked softly, a familiar, comforting sound. She could almost hear Emily's giggle, the one that used to fill the whole house. A soft knock on the door pulled her out of her thoughts. It was Lila, standing there nervously. "Ma'am," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to scare you with what I said that night. I can leave if you want me to." Isabella shook her head gently. "No, Lila, you don't have to leave. I should be the one apologizing. I should have believed you from the beginning." Lila hesitated, then stepped inside. "I've worked in many homes, ma'am," she said softly, "but I've never felt what I felt here. It wasn't evil. It was sad, like someone was waiting for love." Those words hit Isabella's heart like a wave. She felt her throat tighten, her chest ache. Waiting for love. Yes, that was exactly it. Emily wasn't haunting the house. She was waiting for her mother. That night, Isabella decided to do something she hadn't done in years. She lit a candle in the nursery and sat beside the window. The night air was cool, and the flickering flame cast warm light across the old toys and tiny furniture. "Emily," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I know you're here. I know I tried to forget, but I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to keep living after you were gone." The silence was deep. Only the faint ticking of the clock echoed in the room. "I was angry," Isabella continued, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I thought if I pretended it didn't happen, the pain would go away. But it didn't. It only grew stronger. And I made others suffer because of it. The maids, they were only scared because I never let this house heal." Her voice broke as she placed her hand over her heart. "I'm sorry, my baby. You deserved more than my silence." And then something happened. A faint breeze swept through the room, even though the windows were closed. The candle's flame flickered, but didn't go out. Isabella froze, her eyes widening. She could feel a warmth behind her, soft and comforting, like small arms wrapping around her shoulders. For a moment, she didn't move. She just closed her eyes and let the feeling sink in, the love, the forgiveness, the peace. When she opened her eyes again, she saw it not clearly, not fully, but enough. A soft outline of a little girl standing near the rocking chair, smiling faintly. "Goodbye, Mommy," a voice whispered. Light as air, and then she was gone. Isabella broke down, crying and laughing at the same time. The heaviness that had lived in her chest for so long began to fade, replaced by something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. The next morning, the house felt different. The air was lighter, the rooms brighter. Even Lila noticed it. "It feels happy," she said softly as she cleaned. Isabella smiled. "Yes," she replied. "It finally does." From that day, Isabella made a promise to never let silence rule her home again. She began treating everyone who worked for her like family. She opened the nursery door permanently and turned it into a small playroom for the staff's children. Every evening, when she saw the kids laughing and running around, her heart would swell with warmth. She could almost imagine Emily among them, happy, free, finally at peace. Months passed, and one day Daniel returned from his long trip. He was surprised to see the change in his wife, her gentle smile, her calm voice, her glowing eyes. "You look different," he said, smiling. "I am," Isabella replied softly. "I finally saw what I needed to see." That night, they walked through the garden together. hand in hand. The house behind them glowed with soft golden light, filled with life and laughter once again. Before going inside, Isabella turned to look at the nursery window. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a small, glowing figure there waving. She smiled through her tears and whispered, "Good night, my angel." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it a soft, almost musical whisper, like the laughter of a little girl. And from that moment on, Isabella never felt alone again.